There's lots of things you can do to be a better feminist as a man, but here's a simple one. Don't interrupt women.
This is going to Getugly.
The more I listen to third or fourth wave feminists, the more I read what they write, the more I'm convinced that I can see a big difference between that first wave of feminists, the 1960s, 1970s vintage, and this current crop of feminists, the ones who identify with intellectual-ish sounding made-up terms like intersectionality, and who seem very invested in validating the subjective emotional experiences of their friends whenever they feel offended or oppressed by something. And sure, that first wave of feminists also had a tendency to indulge in resentment towards men and had a habit of using men as a convenient scapegoat to transfer responsibility for their disappointments and dissatisfactions in life. But the overall principle that underpinned that first wave of feminism was absolutely reasonable. It was essentially that society not impose barriers to them fulfilling their potential or being the authors of their own lives and living up to whatever personal expectations that they had for themselves, and just being who they wanted to be in the world, making their own decisions without anybody putting any restrictions on them. All very reasonable, of course, right? And I think it's legitimate to say that for the most part, generally speaking, the men of the time must have also recognized this as an absolutely reasonable request, because they acquiesced to it and they helped facilitate bringing about the changes that women wanted. And generally speaking, this was a huge success. It worked out really well for everybody, and I think we're all better off for it today. But this current crop of feminists, this, I guess, the millennial feminists, the third or fourth wave feminists, they seem motivated by something very different than what energized that first group of feminists who were very self-authoring and self-confident and self-assured, and really were asking nothing more of men than that men get out of their way and let them pursue their lives as they see fit. So like I say, the more I read what these feminists write and listen to what they say, the more I'm convinced there's something else going on here, something unacknowledged, something behind the facade of claims of empowerment and equal rights and pussy hats and women's marches. In fact, I'm convinced that these feminists are actually committed to re-entrenching the traditional dynamic that saw women as fundamentally and intrinsically dependent on men to make their lives bearable for them and to solve all of their problems for them. So I know what you're thinking, right? It's like, whoa, where are you getting that from? You know, that's completely opposite to what these feminists say they're about and what they want. But this is the point. I think there's something different between what they are representing themselves to be and what's really going on here. So take, for example, this op-ed that appeared on the website of the Australian daily newspaper, The Age. It's written by a feminist writer named Clementine Ford, and it appeared under the in no way condescending to man title, "Help Us Change the World, Just Don't Expect a Cookie." So Clementine's column follows a template that seems to represent something of a trend, as far as I can tell, in contemporary feminist writing. So it starts out with a lot of complaining about how unfair the world is and a lot of unsubstantiated assertions and interpretations about how everything always goes men's way and nothing ever works out for women because men are this and right. So a lot of that. And then we're presented with a list. This is a list of instructions or orders that men are expected to obediently comply with in order to appease feminists like Clementine Ford. So the thing you'll notice right away about Clementine's column and similar contemporary feminist writing is that the focus is entirely on men. It's all about how men aren't doing enough, or they're doing it wrong, or now that they've done it, here's some more stuff men have to do. Right? Nowhere in this column is there any suggestion or hint that maybe there are things that women could do differently if they're feeling discontented or dissatisfied with their lives, that there might be things that they could change or some self-awareness they could cultivate in order to help them feel more comfortable and fulfilled in their lives. Nope. It's all about what men need to do and what men need to change in order to make women feel content.
And what I'm saying, okay, as a feminist, is that the women have to stop blaming men for their sense of malaise or misery.
Contemporary feminism offers a vision of women as being devoid of autonomy, devoid of agency, empty of personal responsibility. It offers a vision of the universe in which women are absolutely neutral in their natural state until men are imposed into the environment. And men are seen as the medium through which female desire can either be fulfilled or thwarted. This is a very primal, archaic, even archetypal envisioning of the dynamic between women and men. And it's one that essentially sees women in the role of little girl and men as the all-powerful daddy who's able to either affirm his daughter's ego by spoiling her with praise and attention or sabotage the female ego by withdrawing that praise and attention. And if a certain percentage of women in the population want men to play that role in their lives or are more naturally comfortable with men playing that role in their lives, that's fine. That's not even the problem. The problem is that these particular feminists, these particular women want to indulge in that reliance on men, but they want to see themselves and be seen by everybody else as being exactly the same as the completely independent, self-authoring, self-reliant, fully mature, fully evolved women who don't want men to play that role in their lives. And of course, if we don't play along with them, if we don't buy into the charade and pretend that we don't notice that they're nothing like those independent, fully self-authoring women, then if we're men, we're told that we are misogynist, that we're against all women in general. And if you're a woman who doesn't identify with the kind of things that people like Clementine Ford say and write about, then you're told you have internalized misogyny. So you don't even have the right as a woman to your own point of view about this. It's either you agree with contemporary third, fourth wave feminism, you agree with Clementine Ford and people like her, or there's something wrong with you. And to me that sounds quite a bit more misogyny-ist than anything that I'm saying or doing. Put it bluntly, contemporary feminism is a project of self-infantilization. And I know that that is in complete contrast to the picture that third, fourth wave feminists like to present about themselves. But like I'm saying, if you listen to what they say, if you read what they write, it's all about telling men that you have to do this and do that in order to make sure that we feel content. And again, compare and contrast that to the first wave of feminists who, as we said earlier, all they really wanted from men was that men get out of their way. Other than that, leave us alone and let us get on with our lives. That is a huge difference. So let's dive just a little bit into Clementine's column because it's very revealing. And her premise is essentially that all of you feminist men out there who are frantically running around confessing your male privilege and donning pussy hats at women's marches and waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, wondering if you inadvertently committed mansplaining at some point during the day. Clementine's message is, you're all assholes. You're not really committed to the cause. You're only doing this to get a pat on the head and get approval from women and feminists around you. You're not really doing it for the right reasons. So this is the kind of thing that Clementine talks about before she gets to her list. She writes, "It's no secret that boys and men are rewarded for speaking out about gender equality where girls and women are punished." That's no secret, apparently. I mean, it's a secret to me because I've never come across that. I have no idea what she's talking about. And I'm guessing it's a secret to you because you've probably never heard that before. And Clementine doesn't offer any real evidence or an argument. She just asserts this. She has this kind of tendency to just assert things. As contemporary feminists have this tendency to just assert things. And you're supposed to accept them as absolute truths because a feminist has asserted it, right? So she continues by saying things like, male politicians declare themselves feminists because it looks good on their political resumes. We're looking at you, Justin Trudeau. She says business leaders don their white ribbons to protest men's violence against women and are rewarded with ceremonies and poxy titles. The women who generate actual awareness about the victims of survivors of gendered violence, on the other hand, are called liars, cheats, and misandrists. And that's just the nice stuff, right? Because no woman who has ever drawn attention to violence against women has ever received any kind of reaction other than to be called a liar and a cheat and a misandrist, right? Because men, have no interest in violence against women, right? And that's why there's no laws against violence against women. And no man has ever been charged or sent to prison because he has committed violence against women, right? She says this, think pieces abound detailing the lessons men have learned by pretending to be women online. Because just listening to us about our own experiences apparently wasn't convincing enough. So we needed a bunch of men to do some field work and report back on their findings. What condescending, bitter crap is that? Right, first of all, really? Think pieces are abounding about men who are pretending to be women online? I mean, they haven't abounded around me, so again, I have no idea what she's going on about. We're getting to the real target of Clementine's column and her animosity here. So check this out. This is what she writes next. She writes, "So I was unsurprised when a pro-feminist video made by prefects from Sydney Boys High School for this year's International Women's Day amassed a significant number of shares in a very short period of time. Predictably, the video was accompanied by glowing language and ardent praise for the boys involved. Wasn't it fantastic that they were standing up for women like this? Wasn't it fantastic? Well, apparently not, at least not according to Clementine Ford. In fact, this is what Clementine Ford thinks of those high school boys." She writes next, "Well, sure, it's better than the rape threats and abuse that schoolboys often seem to throw about the internet. But is it really an amazing project deserving of heartfelt praise and gratitude?" Nice, eh? Remember, these are high school boys that she's talking this way about. So these high school kids decide to do something positive to show that they're like totally behind feminism and Women's Day, and they produce this video. And this adult woman Clementine Ford decides to use her platform with access to the mainstream media to publicly ridicule those boys and to suggest that it's far more in their character to threaten to rape women than it is to produce well-intentioned videos saying positive things about women. Right? And here you see the dishonesty at the heart of contemporary feminism. You know, one of the most common criticisms leveled at feminism is that it's about hating men. And feminists always respond the same way. They're always like, oh, you don't know anything. I mean, feminism, all it's about is equality. You're not against equality, are you? And yet, they keep pumping out messaging and columns and articles like this, where the hatred and the loathing and the contempt for men and for boys isn't even disguised. And then she goes, until we remove this impulse to reward basic decency, it will fundamentally never be an expression of equality because the act itself for men too easily becomes associated with the privilege of effusive acknowledgement. Now sure, that paragraph is nothing but incoherent gobbledygook. But the thing I really want to know is, when exactly did pandering to petty narcissists like Clementine Ford become the definition of basic decency? So now that Clementine Ford has informed all of you poor bastard feminist men that despite twisting yourselves into pretzels trying to learn everything you've been told you have to think and do everything you've been told you have to do in order to be deemed acceptable by your feminist judges and absolved of the original sin of having been born male, now that Clementine has let you know that that made no difference whatsoever, you're still just a pack of assholes, she's got a whole new list of demands for you to submit to. She writes, instead of encouraging superficial actions, which presumably is everything you've been doing up until now, here are some things men can do if they genuinely wish to support the feminist goal of liberation. Number 1, listen to us when we tell you about our experiences of womanhood. No! Why would I want to do that? Who actually would suggest such a thing? How narcissistic and childish and self-absorbed do you have to be to suggest that men or anybody should have to sit around and listen to you go on about your experiences of womanhood? Do men do that? Do men demand women listen to their experiences of manhood? I went to the football game yesterday and you have to sit and listen to my experience of seeing my team lose and why as a man that was upsetting to me, and then I went out for beers afterwards and you should understand my experience of manhood drinking those 7 beers. I mean, come on, this is submental. But Clementine's very specific. She's got very specific things that you need to do in order to be fully informed about female experiences of womanhood, right? So you have to read books by female writers. You have to watch movies about female protagonists and ones with actual depth. So Bridesmaids is out, but Bridges of Madison County, that counts, or Driving Miss Daisy, I don't know. You have to listen to podcasts made by women. You have to buy music written and recorded by women. I don't even buy music written and recorded by men anymore, Clementine. Do you think I'm going to subject myself to Katy Perry or Taylor Swift or bloody Miley Bloody Cyrus or somebody? It ain't happening, Clementine. Number 2, challenge the men around you even when you don't feel like it. Right? Even when you don't feel like it, guys, right? Because this isn't up to you. This is up to Clementine. She gets to decide what you should do and when you should do it. I don't feel like challenging that guy. He looks kind of scary and angry. But a feminist might think I'm doing something wrong, so excuse me, sir. I challenge you. Number 3, Accept that your opinion isn't always welcome and it certainly isn't always needed. But feminists' opinion, oh my God, we can't get enough of those. I can sit there for hours and hours and hours and listen to people like Clementine Ford drone on about these things that she makes up in her mind and thinks is actually happening out there in the world, and because she lives in a little bubble of other feminists, they all sit there confirming each other's little feminist fantasies to each other. And who couldn't listen to that for days and days and days and days and days? Right? This is like a mansplaining thing, right? This ridiculous, childish term mansplaining that feminists have invented recently. Right? Essentially, it's for underconfident, self-absorbed, narcissistic women who don't see the irony or the hypocrisy in thinking that as women they're entitled to determine when men may and may not speak and what they may and may not contribute to a conversation.
I'm just giving you...
I love the mansplaining. I'm enjoying it.
You're loving what?
The mansplaining that's going on.
What
Well, just talking me through how by not answering the question, by repeating processes which are not related to the question that I've asked.
What's mansplaining, Senator?
Well, it's the slightly patronising and condescending way that you're responding to my questions.
Well, I would suggest, Senator, that if you're putting the word man in front of some description of what I'm doing, you're doing that which I'm sure you're very much against, is making a sexist implication about how I'm conducting my role as a man.
Well, then, the questions
Imagine
I've
the
asked.
reaction, Senator, if I said you were woman-splaining. You're saying that I'm mansplaining.
Well, it is a term that's used.
Is it
when,
by whom?
Well, it is a term that's used.
By rude...
Doesn't make
By
any
rude
sense.
senators. By senators
no.
who are seeking to make gender an issue.
Somehow women having the authority to tell men when they may and may not speak is equality. Number 4, commit to giving up your privilege. Right, so here's this woman, Clementine Ford, who takes for granted that she has this access to the mainstream media. She's got a platform that she can use anytime she wants to ridicule high school boys and write condescending and insulting things about a whole section of the population based on their gender, and she knows she'll get away with it, and she actually gets paid for doing it. And yet she's saying you have privilege and you are obliged to give it up. And last but not least, number 5, stop expecting praise for just showing up. We don't. We don't, Clementine. Nobody is seeking your praise. There's nobody out here who is looking at you or feminists like you and thinking, you know, Clementine Ford and her friends, they seem really nasty and bitter and vindictive, and, you know, the only reasoning they seem capable of is circular reasoning, where they just kind of confirm everything they already believe, and, you know, they don't really seem to have anything particularly constructive or even interesting to contribute, but if only they would praise me, then that would really make my day. Right, she writes, you don't get a medal just because you said somewhere that you think women are people. I mean, thanks for telling us that, Clementine. You don't get a medal for that, guys. I'm sorry, right? If you think women are people, no medal. Congratulations, you're basically decent. Do we have to sit around and chat about it all day? No! No, we don't. Nobody is sitting around and chatting about this all day except you, Clementine, and people like you. The rest of us, we're getting along with our lives, we're getting along fine. Men and women are meeting and falling in love and raising children and just having a normal life. Nobody is sitting around and chatting about this all day except you. So there you have it, gentlemen. Here you can see the result of accepting 20 years of being told by feminists that you are to consider yourself essentially defective by nature, and 20 years of acquiescing to feminist demands that you embrace their ideology and submit to their worldview. And the result? You're being told, not good enough. In fact, here's a new list of demands for you to submit to in order to appease us. I can't imagine for the life of me why men out there, after all of that, aren't highly motivated to get stuck into that new list right away. Come on, guys. What did you expect? And do you really think that more groveling to these people will satisfy them at some point down the road? You know, not that long ago when men were encouraged to be strong and proud and self-confident and authentically themselves, women like this, women like Clementine Ford, hated them. Women like this still hate them. The only difference is now men are weak and confused and unsure of themselves and docile. Does that sound like a good trade-off to you guys? Snap out of it, men. You went against your own rationality and you sacrificed your integrity to appease feminists like this? Feminists like Clementine Ford? How many more lists is it going to take? How many more orders are you going to take? How many more articles that are condescending and insulting to boys and to men is it going to take before you realize this wasn't a good idea? It was a mistake. You tried it their way and it doesn't work. So the message going forward from men to feminists has to be very clear. Not good enough for you ladies? Too bad. The experiment is over.